Hi everyone, I'm Miss Raegan. I'm so happy to celebrate Black History Month with you. Black History Month is recognized each February and honors the triumphs and contributions of Black people in America and throughout the world. And you know, we can celebrate Black culture every day of the year. Today we'll be reading The Secret of the Stones, retold by Robert D. Souci, with pictures by James Ransome. Back in the olden times, there was a man and a woman who had no children. John and Clara loved each other deeply and labored together from sunup to dusk dark. They hoed long rows of cotton, picked the ripened cotton, and tended a vegetable patch between times. Each night they ate a simple meal of peas, okra, beans, and cornbread, then fell wearily into bed. Their cabin was a long way from their fields. One evening, as they walked home along the creek that ran past their cabin, east into the blue hills, Clara leaned down and picked up two little white stones lying side by side. They shone as pale and round and smooth as twin moons in her cinnamon-colored palm. John asked, "What you going to do with those little rocks?" "I'm going to use them to sharpen our knives," Clara said. At home, she set them on the floor near the front door. John built a cook fire, and Clara fixed supper. They were so tired, neither of them gave another thought to the two stones. When they got back from the cotton fields the next night, to their great surprise, they found that someone had ironed their clothes, sawed the wood, and swept the cabin and porch. The same visitor had pounded the corn for their bread, drawn water from the creek, and had a fire made and everything set out to cook supper. They looked all over, but couldn't even find a footprint. Who was it? Did all the work? John wondered. "It's a mystery for sure," Clara agreed, shaking her head. After their meal, while John washed the dishes, Clara sat at the table, using the white stones to whet her kitchen knives. Just a touch from the stones produced a gleaming, razor-sharp edge. When the couple blew out the lantern and climbed into bed, they saw the sharpened blades shining in the dark with a pale light, just as the stones did. Each evening after that, John and Clara found that someone had done all the housework and yard work, then had gone away without a trace. Sometimes they ran home at midday, but they never saw anyone. They found corn partly ground, or peas half shelled, or the broom on the floor, as if someone had stopped sweeping only a moment before. They returned to the cotton fields in puzzlement. When they came back at day's end, the work was all finished. One night, as they sat on the porch, they saw a sturdy, strong-featured woman approaching. She was dressed in a black skirt with a pale blue blouse and gold earrings that shone in the moonlight. People in the neighborhood called her Aunt Easter, though she had no real kinfolk. Everyone was a little bit afraid of the woman because she could see haunts and knew healing secrets and could work charms and sometimes had prophesying dreams. "Evening, Aunt Easter," John and Clara called politely. "I had a dream last night," the woman said. "It told me to tell you that those two little rocks you picked up isn't rocks. When you go to the field, they turn into an orphan boy and girl and do all your work. Then they turn back into rocks." "Oh!" cried Clara. "I knew those stones were special." John asked, "Is there a way to see those little children?" Aunt Easter nodded. "Tomorrow, before sunup, splash clean water on the floor and throw some meal on it. Then hide, but don't make a sound." Then the woman went on her way. Before the rooster crowed the next morning, John and Clara got up and sprinkled the floor with water and cornmeal. Then they hid behind the bed. When the first light of dawn crept past the curtains, the stones suddenly grew into a boy and a girl. They were barefoot and raggedy, but beautiful. They fairly flew around the cabin working. First the boy sang, "Tubin, Tubidy, Mister don't know that the little stones chopped the wood and washed the clothes. Talanga." Then his sister sang, "Tubidy, Tubin, Mrs. don't know that the little stones grind the corn and sweep the floor. Talanga." Clara, in hiding, felt her heart go out to the children. She wanted to kiss and hug them as if they were her very own boy and girl. She almost said something when John whispered, "Aunt Easter said don't make a sound." But the girl swept so hard under the bed that she raised a fierce cloud of dust. John coughed and Clara sneezed. Instantly the children vanished. Then there were only 2 white stones beside the door. "Oh," cried Clara, "I've got to find a way to catch them when they're little children and keep them and raise them like our own." "Only way to do that is to ask Aunt Easter for a charm," said John. Clara agreed. So they filled a basket with snap beans and sweet potatoes for the woman. Then they followed the creek to Aunt Easter's cabin. Aunt Easter was sitting on the front steps of her itty-bitty cabin. She thanked the couple for the food, then said, "I knew you were coming 'cause I dreamed it. And that dream showed me where those white stones come from. Those children lived with their ma and pa on a farm up the mountain. But a conjure man put a spell on their folks, so they sicken and die. Then he go and say he's going to care for those orphans, but he worked them almost to death. When they run away, he turned them into stones by the river. A flood carried them to where you found them. If you want to change them back into real children, you got to fetch me 3 things from that old conjure man." "What things?" asked Clara. "Milk from his white cow that ain't got but 1 black hair. Eggs from his white chickens that ain't got a black feather. Corn that ain't got 1 dark grain mixed in. Bring me these, and I can make a charm to bring those children back for you." "Tell us how to find that conjure man," John said bravely. "Just follow the creek to its end," said Aunt Easter. Soon John and Clara set off, hand in hand, following the creek into the Blue Mountains. The path grew stonier and steeper, but they climbed onward. John carried a pail, and Clara carried a basket. At evening, they found the place where the stream rose up from the ground. Nearby was a cabin. Behind it was a cow shed with a single pure white cow and a hen house with a flock of pure white chickens. All around were cornfields, but every ear had been picked. "That corn must be stored in the house," whispered John. "Look," Clara whispered back. "There's the old man." She pointed to a lamplit window where the tall, thin conjure man sat. His eyes were 2 narrow slits that made him look mean as a rattlesnake. "He'll spell us bad if he catches taking his milk and eggs and corn," said John. "Those belong to the orphans," said Clara. "Now, I'm going to go up to the door and get him to let me in there. While I talk with him, you fetch a pail of milk and put some eggs in your shirt. Then you run into the woods and make plenty of noise. When he go out to see what's what, I'm going to take some corn and run off the other way. We can meet up later on the way home." "Sounds like a good plan, but you be careful," said John, giving her a kiss. When the old man answered her knock, Clara, carrying her empty basket, said politely, "Howdy do." "What you want?" asked the old man gruffly. His snaky eyes and poisonous look made him seem more dangerous than a rattler, made him appear like the very devil himself. But Clara summoned up all her courage and said, "I hear that you can make me a charm to bring me good luck. I can pay." She patted the empty pocket of her skirt as if it held money. "Come in, sit down," said the conjure man. Clara shivered when she saw the jars and bottles and bowls that lined the shelves and a ledge above the blazing fireplace. These held spiders and powders and liquids and dried herbs and all sorts of unpleasant things. In one corner, she saw bushel baskets heaped with white corn. She sat down at a table facing the man. Suddenly, they heard John shouting outside. Instantly, the conjureman yanked open the door, pulled from his pocket a wax bead with the hair wrapped around it, set it in his palm, and muttered a few words. Instantly, the bead flew into the dark. A moment later, John cried out, then was silent. Clara shrieked her husband's name, "John!" The conjure man spun around and said, "So you were part of this mischief too. I'll fix you when I bring back what my witch ball brung down." He slammed the cabin door behind him. Clara couldn't pry the door or any window open. When she tried to break the glass, it just stretched like Indian rubber. Then she remembered hearing once that a conjure man's power rested in a conjure bone, which he always kept in a secret place. She frantically searched the cabin for it. Just as she was about to give up, she found a yellowed bone, like the backbone of a large rat, hidden beneath a loose hearthstone. Clara snatched up the bone just as the conjure man returned, dragging the unconscious John behind him. When he saw what she was holding, he cried, "Put that down, or I'll—" But Clara flung the bone into the fire. The conjureman began to roll around, shrieking, "You're burning me!" The fire blazed up. The conjureman shrank down to an ugly black bug. "This for all the misery you caused those children," Clara said, squashing the bug. It popped with a stink of burned sulfur. At that moment, John woke up. "I spilt the milk and broke the eggs," he said unhappily. "Don't matter," Clara said, embracing him. "There ain't no one to stop us taking all the eggs and milk we need now." They stayed the night in the cabin. At daybreak, they hurried to Aunt Easter's cabin. Straight away, the woman ground the corn. She mixed it with the milk and eggs, added salt and flour, and some other things. "She's just making cornbread," John said softly. Clara nodded, her heart sinking as she watched the other woman pour the batter into 2 tin bread pans and set them in the heated oven. All three sat silently while the cabin filled with the aroma of baking bread. When Aunt Easter pulled out the 2 golden loaves of cornbread, she said, "Tomorrow, sprinkle water and meal like before. Put this cornbread on the table, then hide. When the children eat the bread, you say these words." And she told them the words to break the spell. At dawn, John sprinkled water and Clara scattered meal. Then they put the cornbread on the table and hid behind the bed. When the stones turned into the boy and girl, the children stared at the cornbread, then each began to eat. John stood up behind the bed and said, "Tubin, Tubidy, Daddy say, feed the little children so they won't go away. Talanga." The children expected to turn back into stones. When this did not happen, they clung to one another and began to cry. But Clara came out from behind the bed and said gently, "Tubidy, Tubin, Mommy say, Kiss the children's foreheads so they will always stay. Tulane." She did just that. Then Clara and John hugged the children, turning their tears to smiles. They called their new son Tubin and their new daughter Tubidy. And the children lived happily ever after with their new ma and pa. Tulane.